persisted to, or let's say, had a new life in the 20th century in Soviet times. So my report is more not about institutions, but more about practices and everyday life. I represent the Department of Anthropology, and I'm not quite a historian. This is a picture of a village in the northern part of Russia with big wooden houses covered with snow. And what I would like to say about the region is that this region is, of course, not Siberia, so it's not very far from Moscow, very far from central Russia. But however, it is not very close to the center of the state. And it is very difficult for the central government to control and renovate the way of life that exists in this part of Russia. If we focus on the problem of Russian community, we can say that it is one of the symbols of Russian history, and sometimes communal traditions are seen as a special way of Russia. But we should stress, I should stress, actually, that the Russian land community was juridically created in 1861 during great reforms. Of course, they were village gatherings before these reforms. Of course, they were land repartitions, but as an institution created by government, it began to exist only since 1861. At the same time, it was conceptually created. Here I mean that it was, in a sense in which this word is used by Western anthropologists, it was created or invented, because Russian scientists thought that Russian community is an institution which is already have some communist view, and all the peasants that live in a village, they don't have their own land. They possess land altogether. And of course, this was not true, or this was only partly true. The three main institutions or traditions or practices that are linked with Russian land community are village gathering, where the heads of households take the most important decisions. Second is mutual aid, when different peasants help each other and make some works together. And the last one, and maybe the most important one, was the repartition or redistribution of land. It was seen by many Western scholars and also by Russian scholars who have seen in this repartition the way not to recognize the property. Yes? And that's why Russian community, because according to Western scholars, according to Russian populists, narodniki, Russian community was seen as a commune very similar to communist communes, in which peasants didn't have property. What we can say about the main institution of Russian community, about repartition, after the reform of 1861, community became the collective owner of land. And this collective owner had the possibility to redistribute or allocate the parts of a land, ideally, among households equally. Equally doesn't mean that all the households receive the same part of land. It means that every household who had several number of persons, received an amount of land equal to the number of persons. So the main idea was not to distribute the land equally among households, but to give them possibility to pay taxes. The repartition was very important for the existence of Russian community. But after collectivization in 1930s, the land became a state property, and the redistribution of land wasn't possible anymore. But in that times, in 30s and 40s, a new form of redistribution appeared. A very important notion for understanding of collective farms or kolkhoz is trudodoni or trudodoni in plural. It is the amount of work that should be done by a person to receive the natural pay. So every person, every man, every woman, and even in some collective farms, teenagers, had a norm of trudodoni that they should fulfill. That was kind of what they gave to the government. So we can say that work in kolkhoz, making, producing agricultural goods, is the same way, is almost the same thing as paying taxes before revolution. So Russian village or village gathering, or let's say collective farm gathering, was able to set the norm of trudodoni that every person should produce during a year. And there were different norms. For male, the norm was bigger. For female, it was less. For teenager, it was even smaller. And during gatherings, for example, if a woman in kolkhoz had no husband, but for example, she had several children, the norm was reduced even more. So here we can see that this is almost the same redistribution, but instead of reallocation of land, they reallocate the amount of work to be done. In 1960s, 1990s, collective farms or kolkhozes turned to Soviet farms or совхозes, and it changed the way of life in the village very strongly. The villagers, they were not really peasants. They became agricultural workers. They had salary. Peasants don't have salary. They have possibility to take a rest during several weeks. So it was, I will use this word after it was the some decades of plenty in the village, because government sent a lot of money to make, there was a kind of document The idea was to make the level of life of villagers equal to the level of life in the towns in the city. So in this era of plenty, redistribution was not needed as previously, and villagers got used to receive state support, and after 90s it was really difficult for them to not to receive state money anymore. So in 1990s the main resource, let's say, or the main thing that the villagers could allocate was the government finances that came to the village. And it takes very interesting forms. For example, since 1930s, there is a kind of annual household census. The village administration writes down how many cows every household has, how many meters of land every household has, how many, for example, if a household have a truck or a car, they also write this down. So every year they make a kind of small census. And the government, regional government, областное правительство, regional administration gives some money for this small census. And here we can see another way to change this redistribution mechanism. The administration of the village performs all kind of activities itself. So the people from administration write down all the numbers, they ask people about their the amount of cows, the amount of land, etc. But when we look at the documents, who was really working, we see that in the documents, the people who performed this census were not people from administrations, but unemployed people. Why is it done? Unemployed people don't have any money to live, and if they work for a short period, they can, for example, if they work for 2 years forming the census, after that they can receive during 3 months a very small amount of money, like unemployment benefits. So this idea to make census by the forces of local administration, but to insert into the documents the unemployed people, it's also a redistribution of governmental finances that go not only to people who make this census, but also to people who need this money even more than people from administration. I will sum up. During the 20th century, we see different kinds of redistribution, and we see different kinds of goods that are redistributed. This is land in the end of 19th century and in the beginning of 20th century. These are trudodoni, the amount of work that should be done, and this is governmental finances. Only in 1960s, 1990s, when the government, the money from government came to the village in big amounts, it was not very widespread. But after that, during perestroika, the new form of redistribution came to life, and it shows us that this tradition is really vital. It's changed, it was transformed by the Soviet rules and by the Soviet ideas, but still it exists since 19th century till 21st century. So this is interesting because when we're talking about 20th century, we very often say that the revolution of 1917 crashed the old way of life and changed everything. It really changed a lot, but there are a lot of practices which still exist and which existed during the 20th century under Soviet times. Thank you very much.
Thank you.